So, guys, 1972. Seems like only yesterday.
We were children.
Bob, you were 29. Carl, you were
28.
28. You were a college dropout. You started at 16 at the Washington Star as a copy boy. Bob, you went to Yale and spent 5 years in the Navy. How did the two of you get along?
It was a negotiation, but it was an easy negotiation. And because Carl had 12 years on me in journalism, to be frank, and taught me a great deal. At the Post at that time, Carl was an outsider, a renegade, somebody who thought in his own private way, and I was able to learn that. And the first lesson was, you can't go to the White House or the Nixon re-election committee to find out what's going on. You've got to go knock on doors at night.
Did he teach you anything?
We taught each other constantly, as a matter of fact. We learned from each other the things that you would expect me to do being a renegade. He would end up one day being a renegade, and I would be the straight-laced one. It was a really complementary relationship throughout. Remains that way today, really. We talk a couple times a week. We're close. We look at journalism. We look at the world. And that same dynamic exists today, where we switch roles and we really listen to each other.
Before we talk about Donald Trump, now your reporting is legend. But what was it like reporting Watergate in real time? Did you think it would end with Nixon's resignation?
Not right away, but there was a point where Carl realized that because of what we were writing, that Nixon's closest aide, John Mitchell, his attorney general, was involved in funding Watergate, that it was likely there would be impeachment. But the context for all of this was Ben Bradley, who was the editor of the Post, and bless him, he gave us running room. He just said, go get the story, and he never really would allow anyone to take it away from us, and there were a number of people who were interested in doing that.
Let me build on that for just half a second, because there was a kind of oh my God moment. We had discovered, again, through knocking on doors at night, there had been a secret fund that paid for the bugging at Watergate and other undercover activities, controlled by 5 people, and we learned that one of those 5 people was John Mitchell, the former Attorney General of the United States, Nixon's former law partner. And we were about to do that story. And every morning we would have coffee in a vending machine room off the newsroom, put a dime that day in the coffee machine, which is what coffee cost then, and felt literally hair stand up on my neck. No kidding. And I turned to Woodward and I said, oh my God, this president is going to be impeached. And Woodward looked at me and said, oh my God, you're right. And we can never use that word impeachment in a newsroom lest Bradley or anybody else think we have any kind of an agenda except to keep knocking on the doors.
By profession, reporters like to talk. They like to tell people the news, what's going on. Was it hard to keep the secret of Deep Throat, Bob, for all of those years?
Well, as one of the great Russian novelists said, if 3 people have a secret, it will only stay a secret if 2 of them are dead. In this case, we had a high incentive to do it, and Bradley agreed, and it actually, I mean, it served our interest, because if we would go to people after Watergate on various projects or books and say, we're going to keep your identity secret, it was a flashing neon sign that we really meant it.
They believed you.
Yeah.
Did wives know? Did children know? Did girlfriends know?
The really smart thing we did, neither of us told our ex-wives.
Right. Particularly his, Nora Ephron. Can you imagine that book?
I'm not going to touch that. Someone Someone tweeted not too long ago, who is going to be the Woodward and Bernstein of the Trump administration? It turned out to be Woodward and Bernstein. Did you ever imagine that the two of you would be covering Donald Trump as president?
No. We went to visit him once. We went to visit him in the late 1980s. We had been at an evening that he was present at, and he said, wouldn't it be great if you guys came up and interviewed me? And we went to his office. We can't find the tape now. But it was classic Trump.
Yeah. No, and it was classic Bernstein, because your instinct was, we've got to go talk to this guy. I said, why? I mean, what do you, and you said, well, he'd written The Art of the Deal, and he was in Technicolor at the time. And
it's the only file you've ever lost in your whole life.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to talk to each of you about some of the reporting you've done separately. Carl, you have been very blunt and very outspoken on CNN. And a big concern of yours is a word that reporters don't like to use, lie. How do you think reporters today should be covering Donald Trump when almost every day, if not a couple of times a day, he says something that we like to say is not true?
Two things. First, I think and hope that my outspokenness has been based on the reporting that I do before I get on the air, so that it's undergirded by a solid foundation of reporting, because it's so extraordinary for a reporter to be on the air and saying, the President of the United States is lying. The President of the United States is not telling you what's going on. The real story is not what the President is telling you. And what is so different about Donald, look, presidents have lied, really, in awful ways. What's different about Donald Trump is that his basic approach to the world, to the way he engages with the American people, the way he engages with the world, and with his constituency, is from a default of untruth. That untruth is the basis of how he looks at how to get to his objectives and how he then acts in pursuit of them. It's extraordinary. From anything I've covered, it's unprecedented. Yes, in pursuit of certain objectives, Nixon, God knows, lied and lied and lied and lied. Clinton lied and lied and lied in terms of Lewinsky. This is different. This is a basic way of looking at the world, and how do I, Donald Trump, engage with it and get what I want. And it keeps reverting to untruth. So what do we do? How do we cover this? I think, one, yes, we have to call out the lies, but I think we have to be much more than Trump lie catchers. I think we have to get to the underlying stories and what is the best obtainable version of the truth in terms of what is going on in the great events of the day, whether we're talking about what happened in Turkey with the Saudis, or whether we're talking about voter suppression, which Trump may or may not be lying about, that we need to go deeper. And one of the things that's so terrific about Bob's book is that he went to what we discovered after Nixon resigned. We wrote the final days about Nixon's last year and a half in office, but we didn't do any daily reporting. And in fear, what Bob did is he took a year and a half, and went deep and deep and deep and deeper. And we need that kind of reporting as well, incremental for those of us who work for daily news organizations, but also deeper and deeper books, magazines, etc.
Bob, do you ever cringe when you see Carl on TV out there?
No, I don't, because if you look at what Trump's done, I phrase it a little differently, but that it's a war on truth.
That's right.
That there is a truth out there, and there is a war going on that he has conducted. But I think when you try to pull back and, what's the Trump presidency about? And in this book, I focused on what he did and has done, what his policies are, the internal debates on all the national security issues, the domestic issues. And if there is a way to condense what it means, he is gambling with history. He has just decided he has certain conclusions, certain feelings, willing to take certain risks. Take very vividly in the news the issue of the Saudis. What happened, and I chart this in my book, is that Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, decided with Trump early in the administration, second month really, we're going to go to Saudi Arabia. Maybe it will be Trump's first foreign trip, as it was. And Kushner presented this to the heavyweights in national security, the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and they all said, no, too early, it's a bad idea. And at the meeting, Kushner stood at his end of the table and said very dramatically, I understand what you're saying, but essentially this is a risk worth taking, and my father-in-law is on my side on this, and that's what they did. And now we are seeing, with what's happened with the slaying of Jamal Khashoggi, the fruits of this gamble. And it is a gamble, and they're trying to remake everything in the Middle East, and presidents have tried to do this before. It is a big mountain to climb, and they have put themselves with a new strategy, a new policy, and the risk and the gamble may just be too large in this case. And so there was no sense of, if you will, taking the protocols and rituals and policies of the old order and using some of those. And here you have, literally in this meeting, the three key national security people saying, no, don't do it. And they marched to that top of the mountain themselves. And now look at the situation we have. Tragic, ugly, the sort of thing that may take their policy and turn it right on its head.
I want to read a quote about you, Bob. This is from former CIA Director, former Defense Secretary Bob Gates. He once said about you that he wished he had recruited you into the CIA. The quote is, Bob has the extraordinary ability to get otherwise responsible adults to spill their guts to him. His ability to get people to talk about stuff they shouldn't is just extraordinary. So, how did you get all those Trump insiders to talk to you?
Well, I had the luxury of time, and I disconnected from the Post, did not do stories, did not do television, and it liberated me to go and use the old Bernstein technique. Knock on doors, get into people's homes. And if you think we can do this reporting on the internet or even the telephone, we are fooling ourselves. And I told Trump when he called in August to complain, I said, you can't do this reporting by going to the White House. And I haven't been to the White House for a long, long time, and I'm sure I'm not going to be welcome for a long, long time. But that's, the technique is multiple interviews with people at my home or in their homes, and all you have to do, I mean, it's Jeff Bezos who said when he hires people, he wants to hire people who will listen, and not strategic listening where you're listening to figure out what you're going to say, but actually shutting down and letting your ears absorb what is being said in totality. And you need patience. And as you know, my wife, Elsa Walsh, was in this project as much as I, and she, if I may say this, she read the book and edited it 6 times, would kick me in the rear end when it was, you know, go talk to so-and-so again and get this. But most importantly, she created a work ethic around the house of, this is your project, and if I had to go out at night or go up to my office at night after dinner, she not once dropped the penalty flag on me and said, hey, we used to be married, didn't we? And that commitment on her part was critical.
You literally showed up at some people's houses unannounced late at night.
I modified the Bernstein technique. I would call ahead and say, I'm coming, and they'd often would say, how do you know where I live? And that obviously is not hard.
Just to remind everyone, here are a few headlines from your reporting. Chief of Staff John Kelly called the president erratic and unhinged. The Secretary of Defense, Mattis, said the president had, quote, the understanding of a 5th or 6th grader. Top White House officials were stealing documents off the president's desk because they were afraid he would sign something that was a threat to national security. And last but not least, the president's own attorney, according to your reporting, called him a effing liar and told the president he would, quote, end up in an orange jumpsuit if he testified to Robert Mueller. You had dozens and dozens of White House insiders, people who were working with him every day. Why do you think they talked to you?
Because of the alarm and the distrust that I found, and I think Carl has found this in his reporting, the closer somebody is to Trump, the more concerned they are about what he will do. And he impulse buys. He takes, oh yeah, let's do this, or I had this old idea. And you know, I am somewhat sympathetic to the idea of a disruptor coming in and saying, let's do things a new way. But you cannot throw out the old way. And this is what alarms his national security people, his economics people. He's got some ideas, like on tariffs. He's gambling with China in a way. That whole policy is something, if you had 100 economists here, you might find one who would agree that tariffs actually are a good idea. They are a terrible idea. They hurt American consumers, but he's fixed on these ideas.
Well, let's take those snippets that you've read, and what do they mean? That those closest and dealing most intimately with the President of the United States believe that the President is a danger to the national security of the United States. That is the big story. That's the meaning. And that's part of the reporting that we need to be doing and following up on. How does this manifest itself? That's part of why, along with the lying, this all fits together into one story with many strands, and it all goes back as well as to who is Donald Trump.
Carl, you had been reporting on Donald Trump, but when you picked up the book, when you read Fear and you saw all of the details from the Bernstein method, what did you think?
I thought just what I said. When you get the details, you get the big picture. And that's what's so important, because the granularity of it is what enables us to get past the lying, past the fact that he calls it fake news. You can't get past what's in that book, just as you can't get past an awful lot of what we are reporting, what the New York Times is reporting, what the Washington Post is reporting. You can't get past it by just saying fake news. You can get past it in the sense that, yes, Trump may be winning the war on truth. We don't know that
but
yet.
See, isn't that, I think that's exactly right.
He may be winning it.
And if you look at it, to Carl and myself, we've discussed this a little bit, it's a version of the Nixon strategy, make the conduct of the press the issue and turn it on its head and say it's fake news, the press is the enemy of the people, this is the big issue of the day, not the conduct of the president. And let's be frank about it, Trump has been ingenious in deploying this. And how do we in the media deal with it? After Nixon resigned, Katharine Graham, the publisher and owner of the Washington Post, a great lady, a great friend of ours, wrote Carl and myself a private letter, which is not private because she printed it in her memoir. And in it she said, Dear Carl and Bob, Nixon, you did some of the stories, Nixon resigned, don't start thinking too highly of yourself. And then she said, let me give you some advice. And she said, beware the demon pomposity. And what she meant is, don't go, just kind of do the job, stay out of the limelight. In those days, in 72, 73, Bradley would not let us go on television. He would not let us unleash that demon pomposity, which exists in our business and politics. I think it is a tone problem that often gets communicated to viewers and readers, and we really have to dial it back because people do not like that tone or the inference of some, this is the only way to look at it.
Do you think Trump is winning with the fake news?
Certainly, first of all, it's not just Trump. I think you have to put Trump in the context of our era, Trump in the context of social media, Trump in the context of which institutional decline in terms of being highly regarded. So there's a whole aura in the larger culture of untruth, and that people are very accustomed to being skeptical. And I think that what Trump has accomplished is, look, we've had demagogues in our past. We had Joe McCarthy. But Joe McCarthy was not the president of the United States. And we see the demagogic technique. Here we have a president of the United States who, in the same week that the Turks are telling us what seems to have happened to a reporter via the Saudis, he is in Montana, the president of the United States, praising a congressional candidate, member of Congress, for body slamming a reporter, and again going on about the enemy of the people, a phrase that has horrible, tyrannical history. So yes, we are in a place where he has moved the conduct of the press to be an issue in a way that has never had such resonance in the culture before, and it is carrying what he is doing. Again, I go back to what I said when we started here. His way of engaging with the world. Most presidents engage eventually through historical truth, through accepted fact, through a body of knowledge that is agreed upon by both parties to at least represent a bottom line that can be.
Exceptions, like Nixon.
Well, no, Nixon was a criminal president, yes. Absolutely.
But I think the issue is also, are we taking Trump's bait at times?
At times.
By engaging in this and not just sticking to, this is what we found out, these are the facts. I mean, I find myself being aggressively nonpartisan in all of this. This is not a partisan analysis. This is a reporting analysis, and I think in the end, that there are lots of Republicans, call them Reagan Republicans, who look at what Trump is doing. And I've talked to a number, and I've seen lots of them enough in groups. I think there's a lot of anxiety there that Reagan would not be getting out of the treaty that Reagan signed with Gorbachev in 1987 for intermediate nuclear weapons in Europe. So maybe maybe people are going to listen to fact. I don't think they're going to listen to our emotions.
How powerful a tool for him, Bob, is Twitter?
You know, I mean, one of the joys of my life is I don't do Twitter. And
Well, you have an account.
yeah, I have an account, and I have somebody. You know, I mean, it's there, but it's not engaging me. So I don't know. But he's out there, and I've seen it happen. You people every day. It looks like X will be the issue, and then he'll tweet, and everyone goes to responding to him or reporting on him, as you have to. And that's why I think digging into his decisions and policies, and he really is gambling across the board.
My question is this, though. Your advice to young reporters: keep your head down, keep doing your work, go out there, talk to people. Is that powerful enough with his branding and with his Twitter feed?
It's the rules of engagement are the rules of engagement. We have to do our reporting. That's the basis of what we do, is the reporting. And the more that our reporting organizations dedicate ourselves to doing the kind of basic and in-depth, nose forward, ass, up, reporting.
And that was a Bradley phrase.
Right.
What do? Nose down, ass up, moving slowly forward.
But that also means, though, that when the story ends up being, as it does in Bob's book, as it does in trying to make sense of the lying as the basic means of engaging the world, and the President of the United States, in the judgment of those closest to him, many of those closest to him being a danger to the national security of the United States, we have to keep reporting on those aspects and pointing out the lies. We can't abandon that aspect, but we must do it in concert with the deeper reporting. I give the example of voter suppression. The President sent a tweet out 2 days ago warning individual citizens about committing voter fraud, supposedly. And warning that they are going to be prosecuted and looked at by the law. It said we need to be doing stories that really look at whether or not there is widespread voter fraud in this country. We've done some of it. One of the things Trump does is he moves on to the next thing so fast that we can't keep up with it. But we still need to be doing that basic aspect of the reporting. Bob did it in his book. We also have an awful lot of reporters in the news organizations we work with.
30 seconds, 2 final questions quickly. With all of your reporting, which was devastating in fear, Bob, and which you've reported on, Carl, do you think Donald Trump is fit to be president? Bob?
It really is out of my lane. Let people judge that. And just from doing this so many times, Carl taught me, always beware of the true believers on both sides. And I think that's true, and there have been enough occasions where I've thought something was one way and it turned out to be the other way. Stick to the reporting.
Carl.
You've raised the right question about fitness, because it's what we should be reporting on. And if you go back, you look at what some of us were reporting here on CNN a year and a half ago, it was that members of Congress of the president's own party were saying privately, many of them, they did not believe he was fit to be president. That's what we need to be doing. We ought to be, in fact, going to every member of Congress, perhaps, knocking on their doors, perhaps, at night, and seeing what they say privately about whether or not they believe he is fit, particularly Republicans, to be President of the United States, rather than impose our judgment on the question. But it's a story, and we should be pursuing that story.
We will note that neither of them answered my last question. Thank you both so much for being here.